Arthur Streeton has a very special place in Australian art history. He's very much celebrated and praised and much loved. But what's fascinating about Streeton is he had no formal art training, really. He did a few night classes in drawing at the National Gallery School when he would have come in contact with Frederick McCubbin then, but no formal training. But he met Tom Roberts, and Tom Roberts gave him these ideas of Impressionism. And he was able, because he's not constrained by his training, to run out into the field and to paint the most impressionistic, the most bold landscapes he could. I think a lot of that had to do with his youth. He had no responsibilities of family. He could just take an idea and run with it. Streeton is very much central to the Heidelberg story, having founded the Heidelberg camps. This was very much his time. What's interesting about Streeton and the Heidelberg School is the myths that surround it. Streeton remained one of the very last artists alive from that period in the 1930s, and he was also a journalist at the same time. He was able, in this position, to reconstruct the myths, to promote his friends and to promote himself, and to rewrite the history or to construct his own desirable history of Australian art. I think my favourite historical sort of myth, if you will, is the one that involves Conda. He's quite competitive historically with Conda. Conda, of course, goes to England and becomes a very notable painter. Streeton doesn't have so much success in Europe. But as a journalist in the 1930s, Streeton makes an attempt to say that he'd determined his own painting style before Conda even appeared on the scene, because people like to look at Conda and look at Streeton and say that Conda influenced Streeton, and Streeton hated this. So Streeton claims in the newspaper in the 1930s that he painted the spring painting before he met Charles Conda. Interestingly though, recent conservation analysis has discovered that Conda's name is actually etched with Streeton's name with a pinprick into the surface of the painting. So Streeton and Conda were actually already friends and painting together at the time. After the success of the Heidelberg camps, Streeton is in the fortunate position to be able to pack up and take off to Sydney when this terrible depression hits Melbourne in the 1890s. Streeton once again strikes gold in Sydney, and he becomes synonymous with Sydney Harbour. And his Sydney Harbour paintings remain some really wonderful statements, and he becomes the first Australian artist to really paint the brilliance of the harbour, I think. From Sydney in 1897, he runs away to England to finally pursue success on the continent. Success, it eludes him essentially. He supports himself by sending his paintings back to Australia and readily finding a market here. He remains in England though for 20 years, and he marries his wife there, and he lived quite well, and his paintings were earning quite a bit of money back here. Eventually, after World War I, he returns to Australia, and he's very much a national hero by this period, and his work is very much treasured. And he remains here until his death in the 1940s.